And what is real is modern. By the second half of the 20th century, Aokigahara's association with suicide had hardened into public consciousness. Literature helped shape that image. Media repetition deepened it. Numbers from the early 2000s turned the forest into international shorthand for despair. Then came documentaries, internet culture, and global fascination. The place became known far beyond Japan, often in the worst possible way, as an icon before it was understood. That transformation changed the forest itself. Not physically, socially. Once a place becomes widely recognized as a site of self-destruction, it begins to attract not only vulnerable people, but a whole support system built around the possibility that someone may be arriving in crisis. Aokigahara now exists inside that contradiction. It is both a natural destination and a prevention zone. The same landscape that draws hikers and cave visitors also draws patrols, watchfulness, and intervention. That is why the edges matter so much. Local prevention guidance is strikingly practical. It is not written like folklore, it reads like field awareness. Someone alone, someone arriving late in the day, someone dressed in a way that does not match the terrain, someone lingering at a signboard, someone drifting near an entrance without clear purpose, someone carrying light gear, someone sitting for too long, staring at a phone, hesitating. These are not cinematic clues, they are human ones. In official guidance for people working around the forest, responders are told to approach in pairs when possible. They are told to explain why they are speaking to someone. They are told to ask direct, careful questions. They are told to listen. If risk appears serious, they are told not to leave the person alone. That detail changes the tone of the entire story, because now the forest is no longer only the setting, it is a place where strangers are trained to notice hesitation. There's even a name for some of this outreach, a kind of contact patrol built around speaking to people before they disappear into the trees. Local teams, municipal workers, police, transport staff, and community partners all appear in different parts of the prevention network. Daytime teams patrol around key access points, cave areas, walkways, and roads. Night patrols look for parked cars in dark pull-offs, solitary pedestrians, and people who do not seem to be there for ordinary travel. This is a profound shift from the way the forest is usually imagined abroad. The international image is all mystery. The local reality is procedure. Workers watch bus arrivals, they watch parking lots, they watch for people alone in places where being alone at that hour feels wrong. Police coordinate with local agencies. In summer, additional protective activity can be put in place. More recently, authorities have also used drone-based monitoring to strengthen nighttime watch around the forest perimeter. The purpose is not surveillance for its own sake, it is interruption. That is the essential word in Aokigahara's real story. Interruption before entry, interruption in the parking lot, interruption at the sign, interruption in conversation, interruption long enough for someone to say what they came there carrying. And this is why the signs matter so much. The signs at the forest's entrances have become famous, but their importance is often flattened into internet trivia. In reality, they are part of a deliberate attempt to meet people at the last moment before isolation becomes complete. Their message is not supernatural warning, it is human appeal. Think again, remember your family, seek help, do not decide alone. In another kind of documentary, this would be the moment to deepen the myth. But the truth is more unsettling than myth. Aokigahara does not need ghosts. It has expectation. People come here already believing they understand what this forest means. That belief is dangerous. A place can become a script. Once it does, geography starts to serve psychology. The silence feels symbolic. The trees feel final. The walk away from the road becomes part of a ritual that thousands of strangers already know by reputation. Even the forest's visual details can be misread through that lens. The famous claim that compasses go wild here is widely repeated, but official tourism guidance pushes back on that story. Used normally, compasses behave as expected. The greater risk is simpler, leaving designated paths in dense terrain where footing is uneven, sightlines collapse, and direction becomes harder to judge once landmarks disappear.
At the foot of Mount Fuji, there is a forest so famous for death that people often arrive already carrying its story in their heads. Not because they know its geography, not because they understand its history, but because they have heard the nickname. They know the legend. They know the headlines. They know the videos, the rumors, the ghost stories. The wordless dread attached to a place called Aokigahara. And yet the real story begins somewhere much quieter than myth. It begins with a trailhead sign, a parking area, a person standing alone longer than they should, a local patrol car moving slowly after dark. Because Aokigahara is not just a scary forest, it is a real forest in a real prefecture with real paths, real caves, real tourists, real search patterns, and real prevention work built around one terrible fact. For decades, some people have come here intending not to come back. Geographically, Aokigahara sits on the northwestern flank of Mount Fuji in Yamanashi Prefecture. The forest spread across old lava laid down by a major eruption in the 9th century. That matters because the ground still carries the logic of that eruption. The surface is broken, irregular, and root-bound. Trees rise from hardened volcanic rock. Cavities in lava features remain part of the landscape. The forest is dense, green, and in many areas unexpectedly beautiful. This is one of the first things that gets lost in the way the place is talked about. Aokigahara is not a dead zone. It is not a cursed wasteland. It is part of a living landscape near the Fuji 5 lakes, with designated hiking routes, lava caves, moss, wildlife, and regular visitors. Official tourism material describes it as a primeval forest and warns people not to leave marked trails. In other words, the real place is not a set from a horror film. It is a natural environment with normal uses, normal management, and one abnormal burden. The silence is part of that burden. People often describe the forest as unnaturally quiet, and that reputation has helped fuel the mythology around it. But the explanation is less mystical than physical. Porous lava can absorb sound. Dense vegetation dampens distance. Once you move away from roads and tourist routes, noise falls off in a way that feels immediate and personal. The forest does not roar, it closes in. That sensory experience matters because Aokigahara has become famous not just for what happens there, but for the emotional atmosphere people project onto it. Some of that atmosphere comes from folklore. The forest has long been associated in popular imagination with yurei, or restless spirits of the dead. It is also sometimes linked to stories of ubasute, the abandonment of the elderly in times of famine. But this is the point where caution matters. Those stories belong to folklore, cultural memory, and later retellings. They are not the same thing as modern documented history. The danger in Aokigahara is not that the legends are real, it is that the legends can obscure what is real.
That distinction matters, because exaggeration can blur real danger. The forest is not lethal because magnets are pulling people off course. It is dangerous because people can step into it carrying intent, and because natural features that are manageable for prepared hikers feel very different to a distressed person walking alone in fading light. Aokigahara also cannot be understood apart from Japan's broader suicide crisis. For decades, Japan has wrestled with suicide as a national public health issue shaped by overlapping pressures, mental illness, economic strain, social isolation, shame,
exhaustion, and a culture that has often struggled to speak openly enough, early enough, about personal collapse. National patterns change over time. Some measures improve, some age groups remain deeply vulnerable, but the broader fact remains. Aokigahara is not the cause, it is one highly visible expression of a much larger problem. And that brings us to one of the most important decisions local officials have made. They stopped feeding the forest's legend with constant public counting. For years, body totals in attempt numbers helped define how the world talked about Aokigahara. But officials increasingly understood the trap. The more the forest was ranked, branded, and quantified, the more it risked becoming a destination in the imagination of people already in crisis. So, the strategy shifted. Less public spectacle, more prevention. Less mythology, more contact. Less identity as a death site, more effort to restore the forest as a place of nature rather than narrative. That may be the hardest battle of all, because symbols are stubborn. Aokigahara now exists under two competing realities. One is the global image, haunted, notorious, sensational, endlessly recyclable. The other is the local one, a managed forest where workers, police, volunteers, transport staff, and municipal networks try to recognize despair before it disappears into the trees. That second story is harder to dramatize. It has no monster, no twist, no supernatural explanation. Just people reading signs of pain on the edge of a forest. And maybe that is why it matters more. The final truth about Aokigahara is not that it is a place where people go to die. It is that enough people have done so that strangers now wait for the next one. They watch the parking lots, they circle the roads, they notice the person standing too still at the sign. They ask the question most places never ask out loud. Are you in trouble? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Can we help before you go any farther? That is not horror. It is a society trying, imperfectly, to catch human beings at the last possible threshold. Beneath Mount Fuji, the forest still holds its silence. The moss still spreads over old lava. Tourists still walk the marked paths. Caves still draw visitors into the volcanic underside of the landscape. But another landscape exists there too, one made of reputation, despair, vigilance, and intervention. That is the real Aokigahara. Not a legend in the trees, a warning about what happens when loneliness finds a place that the world has already taught it to recognize.